Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Swedenborgian Community Online, your affirming interfaith community, grounded in a mystical Christianity that believes there are many ways to heaven, many people in connection with divinity through love, through goodness and life. Today, we are going to reflect on how scriptures the world over, from the Bible to the Hindu scriptures, the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the text at the heart of Taoism, and many others, speak about letting go of judgment, letting go of distraction, and turning inward towards the divinity that empowers our every step. Indeed, we're told today that anxiety and depression is at epidemic proportions. I think many of us hear that voice of judgment within all the time, and it's not just directed towards what we don't like in the world. It's often directed towards ourselves. And because we sit in that place of judgment, as well as distraction, anxiety, and fear, it's hard to live with ourselves. And it can be even harder to really accept people around us the way they should be accepted and upheld, affirmed, and uplifted. Indeed, unless someone's very similar to us and even a little bit, kind of servile towards us, we can often lash out at them. It's a characteristic of narcissism and hurt. And it's something that actually doesn't serve us, even though I think we often feel like it helps, it's protective. So reflect for yourself for a moment as we've invited. How often you're at the whims of your external mind. Not just judgment, just the blowing wind of it. Distraction, habits that draw your attention. Those things that you can't help but return to within. And then how often are you free to step away from that, to find peace, to find the peace of God within? God is the higher power. Whatever you call that divinity, that personable life that gives forth to all life, all love and compassion. I think often we're caught in the whims of our mind. And it may seem strange because you think, well, aren't I my mind? And yet we find in psychiatry to meditation that actually taking a step back from what we would call our thinking mind, our feeling mind, is really empowering for our own healing and for our own sense of peace and acceptance of life. But not just acceptance, because taking that step back to a place of peace, of watchfulness and engagement, actually often helps us engage with the world further to uplift greater peace and justice around us. I was listening to a famous yogi, Sadhguru. I recommend him. He's pretty entertaining, very insightful in many cases. I find him on YouTube. And he talks about how often we're trapped in the trash can of the world, which he calls our mind. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What does that mean? And he says, we can't control most of the inputs in our lives. A lot of the kind of groundwork for how we work is laid at a very early age. And people come along and they treat us poorly. This and that. Now I could argue with him that how much empowerment we can find to change that. But I think that's ultimately his point. He says, instead of being in the trash can, take a step out, and it becomes compost. Which nourishes us to enlightenment. I hear a similar sentiment from Jesus in our call to worship today, our scripture reading from Matthew 7. Similar to Krishna, who often emphasizes the same things within the Hindu religion, Jesus emphasizes this idea that we must center ourselves on non-judgment and love to find peace in this world, to walk freely. Now, our scripture reading says, don't judge lest ye be judged, from our first reading. And so many people say, well, I can judge if I'm willing to be judged, or at least be judged like that. Lest ye be judged in the same way. But I don't think that's the point. I don't think the point is to say, well, it's not something I'm doing, so I can judge you as much as I'd like. I'm free to. No, I think some of Christ's other statements kind of clarify the matter. He talks about throwing the first stone, ye who is without sin. He talks about giving up our hold on the past, on people's past mistakes, welcoming the prodigal son, the worker who shows up at the end of the day. In fact, in many ways, Jesus keeps emphasizing forgiveness. Forgiveness. A radical acceptance. And when I hear that idea, I think, well, do I forgive some of our leaders for the way they're behaving? Do I move on? What does that mean? Not being judgmental. No, I think judgment in this light is different than discernment and rationality. It's different than trying to construct something healthy and say, you know what, we need to do a better job at this. Or at least I feel that way. No, I think it's holding that kind of judgmental feeling, that dismissal, that yes, let's stone the adulteress. Let's turn away the son. And as we explored with the kids, I think we hold that kind of judgment all the time. And we do that within ourselves as well. In our story today, it's a beautiful story, Elijah. And most of the time what we hear about Elijah is the part that we ended on at the beginning of it, where he sets things on fire with the power of God and defeats the prophets of Baal. But I like the segment that Susan read today because it kind of paints a picture of a drought-ridden country, really struggling. Famine, death, disease, some of the things often pointed at today to be at our doorstep. And it paints this picture of the reason there's this drought is because these people aren't behaving in community in a healthy way. I think the reason the god Baal is considered not a healthy representation of the divine one is because in the worship to Baal, at least according to our scripture, there's self-harm, there's lustful practices, there's even murder of the prophets of Jehovah. And so the people, in a sense, are in a spiritual drought as well, suffering from a lack of God's water, God's rain. And Elijah is sent to bring the rain back. God says, well, enough of this. Now is the time. And in a sense, the drought almost serves to eventually help the Israelites come back to true life, true spiritual life, and peace. But to get there, Elijah shows up and he's rejected. There's a few different reactions we heard. You're going to disappear again. Where have you been? We're in the middle of the drought. Elijah could have said, well, you've killed many of the Lord's prophets and X, Y, and Z. He doesn't go there. He says, I'm here. You don't have to worry. Then when presented to the king rejects him as well. And so Elijah says, you know what? I'm here to help. But first, let's address the religious issues. And it's interesting to me because in Scripture, and I don't like to get into these details that often, in Scripture, numbers often mean something very heavy. And I think a number you've heard many times in Scripture is 40. The number 40 or 400 is often used to represent a state of trial, temptation, You have 40 years in the desert, 40 days in the wilderness for Christ, the temptations of Christ. You have 400 years of enslavement. It actually repeats again and again, 40 days and nights of rainfall. And Elijah, when he presents this idea that he wants to challenge the religiosity of Israel, he's confronted with 400 prophets, 450 and 400. All of which speaks to this idea that this is a time of great trial for the Israelites. And ultimately, what he does is just point to the power of God. Now, I think it's kind of hard to relate to in a physical sense. Like, we're not expecting a prophet like Elijah to show up. And perhaps we would react like, what are you doing here? I don't believe you're an actual prophet. How come you come now when so much has already happened? I think it's hard to relate to it in that way. But I think it's actually true also within each of us. That in the time of drought, the time of spiritual pain, lack of nourishment, there is still that voice of Elijah that starts creeping back in, saying, I'm here to change things a bit. I'm here to transform your worship, your spirituality, not necessarily convert you to something else, but to bring health, to bring life to your living, which in a sense is a conversion of spirit towards true divinity, whatever we call that God. And that voice is often rejected. We get caught up in the judgment towards the sense of peace, maybe just the idea of health. Oh, I don't want to do that. I've been doing this. This works for me. I've been doing it since I was 12 or whatever. Something I use to get through my day. It can be addictions of all kinds. It can just be the distractedness that I think many of us can center on, especially in today's connected society. The judgment of others, judgment of ourselves. And in that drought, we may not even realize it's a drought, but I think more and more people are accepting, yes, I have an issue, anxiety, depression are at epidemic proportion today. I'll take this drug. I'll do this or that. And sometimes we hear very harmful ramifications with not addressing the core issue, being centered on peace, on love, healthy practices, compassion for others. We hear it throughout Christ's ministry what type of consciousness he wants to bring when he asks us to take that plank out of our eye. Christ speaks of a radical love that's hard to live up to today, or at least we don't do it very often. We like to get into our silos and reject everybody else. In a way, we like to reject many parts of ourselves. I'm not doing that right. Oof. The anxiety and pain we carry doesn't make it easy to be human. And yet I think, as Christ often uplifts, it's meant to be easy to be human. That sense of peace is at the core of our hearts. There's water, there's rain, just waiting for the day that it might work, it might take hold, if we were to allow it to. I don't know what the future holds for our earth, for our communities. I know there's a lot of really scary things knocking at the door. We may even have trouble gathering in the future. From what we hear about the coronavirus, many of the folks that we hold dear, everyone, each of us, is at some risk for sickness, for even death. And not to be rabble-rousing, but I think we should prepare, at least mentally, for how are we going to craft community in that world if we can't gather the way we used to. How are we going to uplift each other and remember each other in non-judgment, in love, and compassion? I think Elijah is knocking at our door. I don't know if it'll bring the rain we might want. But we can still find that centeredness on God today. Whether sunshine or clouds of ash, funny enough, God still asks us to remember the reality of His presence within ourselves, within all others, to allow His healing light to shine in our minds, allowing for composting, for a garden to continue to bloom, for us to find it a little easier to be human. Amen. Let's take a few moments, just closing our eyes, opening our hands, taking a few deep breaths. Giving up our breath in devotion to God as an offering, giving up the moment as an offering to the divine presence, the divine personhood that gives rise to all our humanity, all our humaneness, all the beautiful and magnificent things about our personalities and consciousness, more human than human. Noticing that she's present within us in every moment, that Jesus Christ is with us, uplifting peace and love, whatever we may call Him. Noticing that devotional service that gives rise to peace within. Devotional attitude of letting go of our plank and releasing judgment of others. Allow us for centeredness on life and peace. That it's always available to us, the wellspring of joy in our hearts, at the seed of our consciousness, our mind. That despite the horrors of the world, we can let go of fear. And despite our seeming finitude and limited strength, we can be empowered for transformation within and around us.
And time is not afraid, for if it's real, the shining steel will find its better suede. So off I go alone, and I leave behind my blade, for if it's real, the shining steel is safely in the suede. in a lesser form. I trust the great can outweigh the quiet and the storm. And so I am to leave you before the light of morn. But if it's real, the spinning wheel will catch me like a thorn. Catch me like a thorn. If it's real, the spinning wheel will catch me like a
Hope you enjoyed that music from Justine Lucas. We are so happy to connect with you today. Let us continue to turn inward, reflecting on how divinity, how God has spoken to us today. As we listen to this beautiful melody from Paul Deming.
The heavens are telling the glories of God, and angels are praising His name. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and we are the saints of the King. So cry out, O Zion, cry out to the King. Lift your voice and shout, O Zion, lift up His banner and sing. If we do not praise Him, the rocks will cry out, but I will not be put to shame. Rehearsing a heavenly shout. Lift your voice and shout, O Zion. Lift up his banner and sing. Shake off the dust of this world. Break loose the binds and be free. Shake loose your worries and fears. Lift up your eyes and see. And see. The heavens are telling the glories of God. And angels are praising his name. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and we are the saints of the King. So cry out, O Zion, cry out to the King. Lift your voice and shout, O Zion, lift up his banner and sing. So cry out, O Zion, cry out to the King. Lift your voice and shout, O Zion, lift up his banner, lift up his banner, lift up his banner and sing.
It's very nice to be able to connect with each other with the support of such beautiful artistry and music. If you have your own musicality, your own art that you'd like to share with us, please reach out at Swedenborgiancommunity.org or wherever you find this audio or video. We're on YouTube and podcasting apps. And also please reach out if you're wanting to connect for any reason. Share your ideas, your feedback, your perspective. So today we've been reflecting on clearing our eyes to see divinity. I hope today's message spoke to you, that you're willing and able to see some ways forward to connect further with God within, the empowerment of divinity that enlightens your every step, that gives you insight, that shines light in your mind, that allows you to help others to see divinity in their walks as well. Instead of getting mired down by judgment, being uplifted by love, wisdom, and justice. We're in a world today that really needs justice, that needs work, whether it's in politics, in your local environment, just within your own family and work. I think there are many places we can make an impact by approaching things with a renewed perspective, allowing Goddess, to work through us and empower clarity and a higher vision for all humanity. So thanks for connecting with us today. Thank you for uplifting our community wherever you are. Please continue to connect with us, subscribe, follow us on your favorite social media, Facebook, Instagram, we're even on Twitter, and also share this with those you might think could use it. All right, bye.